The next speaker is going to tell us about a different type of science. His name is Yuri van Gest, and he's the founder of Singularity University here in the Netherlands, as well as a co-author of a fantastic bestseller globally called Exponential Organizations. I had the pleasure of actually visiting Singularity University in January last year as part of an MBA module, and it is a really fantastic experience. So I'd like to invite Yuri to the stage to give us his overview before we do the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to be here. I would like to start with a short video, 2 minutes, a summary of my talk for today. Are you ready? Okay, here we go.
My wife looked at me and said, "Hey, what's going up there? The water's gone."
Und in so kurzer Zeit, ne?
It was strangely quiet. It looked like somebody had taken the plug out of the sea. And people were drawn to it because it looked so strange. There was a sense of calm. There was no sense of panic whatsoever. You could see forming up from left to right a beautiful crescent on the horizon. It looked quite lovely. We were spellbound, everybody was looking at it. But at that time there was no way to know how big the wave was.
Die brechen da hinten und die Wellen, die brechen da hinten auch heftig, oder? Alter Schwede.
I filmed the scene again and again.
Was ist das?
I was in a special way fascinated about it.
Guck mal da hinten, Schnicki, wie das hochpescht. Das Wasser.
I said to myself, hey, what a perfect wave.
Hammer. Was da hinten abgeht. Nein. Aber da hinten, da geht, das ist ja Wahnsinn. Das ist richtig.
We all know how this ended, of course, very tragic. Why do I show you this video? It's very intimidating for some of you, probably. 3 reasons. First, the tsunami that you see over here is a metaphor for all new technologies impacting our world. We call that singularity, a difficult word. Second, most people in this video are not able to interpret what's going on. They just extrapolate linearly their worldview from the past into the future. They are not able to disrupt their own assumptions about the world until it's too late. Oh, I know this wave, it's a special wave, but it's different. The same is happening now today globally in all vertical markets, including solar and energy. And third, the wave at first is small, but near the shore, it ramps up, becomes bigger. The same is happening with most exponential technologies. So at Singularity University, I've been involved now for 8 years there, brought it to Holland. We believe that the best vision on the future is what's happening on the edges that becomes mainstream in the next few years. And disruption is always happening like this, not like this. So you have to really change your mindset and perception. What's happening? Nanotechnology, very important for your business. I'll show you later. Quantum computing, blockchain, 3D printing, sensors, all these technologies are doubling in capacity every 18 months on average. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But more importantly, think about 100 different exponential technologies that are doubling in capacity, but also are converging. What if you have 40 thermoplastics with nanocoatings and graphene and solar panels? I'll show you later. This is happening as we speak today in China. And the previous speaker was quite, let's say, pessimistic in certain ways. And I'm a little bit more hopeful. And the reason is the convergence of all these technologies. Some examples. Solar, as you know better than me probably, dropped from $30 per kilowatt hour 30 years ago to $2 today in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago, unsubsidized. Some other examples. Industrial robots dropped from $500,000 to $1,000 in 10 years. This will impact solar panels. Drones for inspection management dropped in cost by 100 times or 1,000 times in the last 10 years. This is the new world we are entering. Think about the video, the tsunami. It's a new phenomenon. Who knows about quantum computing? Show of hands? Okay. It's real. Not a generic quantum computer, but only for optimization problems, as you can see over here. D-Wave, Canada, US. But also soon Google will have a big announcement in the next month or two. IBM, Rigetti, but most importantly in China. They have quantum AI operational. Quantum computing is already available for more than a year at scale for optimization problems. What is a quantum computer? A quantum computer is basically a parallel computer. A classic computer like we are using today, also your smartphone, is a sequential computer using bits, zeros and ones. A quantum computer is a parallel computer. That means that we have a 0 and a 1 at the same time. Quantum bits, qubits. So it can process information way faster than before. And we move from a linear world, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, to an exponential world, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, to a quantum world. And quantum is exponential on exponential. Moore's law on top of Moore's law. That means 1, 2, 3, 1,000, 10 to the power of 23. So now soon we have the computational power of the whole universe in one box. Not science fiction. Not science fiction. Happening in China first. This will impact energy to a large degree. Why? We are able to create new materials, nanocoatings, nano-quantum materials already today, by the way. And this will impact climate change, and that's why I'm very hopeful. The next step is robots. Today we have robots creating robots. No humans involved. 95% operational. Done by Toyota, SoftBank, and Foxconn, the maker of your iPhone, iPad. Implications for solar? Think about solar panels. Lower cost, more scale, more adoption. And then we have blockchain. Who knows about blockchain? Probably most of you. Okay. Blockchain is the platform below Bitcoin. Now, everybody knows about Bitcoin, of course, I assume. So this is a platform which is basically a public ledger logging all transactions and validating them. Why is this important for energy? Think about solar energy. You can certify it, authenticate it, and you can automate a lot of transactions in exchanges. Supply and demand, matching, AI, blockchain, control, seamless smart contracts. This will create a lot of efficiencies and more security and more effectiveness and speed. And this is now being developed in many different places. In China, neo.org is very popular and big. We have IOTA, Hyperledger, of course the Bitcoin blockchain and Ethereum. So it's a complex field, but it becomes very important in the next few years. It's the operating system of the new world, basically. Some examples, as you can see over here. Blockchain can be used, exchanges, certification. It will certify the authenticity of solar energy. And it can be an issue in some countries, as we have seen in the last few years. The next speaker will do a deep dive on this, Takehiro, so I'll skip this slide. And then we have artificial intelligence, algorithms, as we probably have heard about, show of hands, machine and deep learning. It's basically self-learning software looking for patterns in data all by itself without any human input or intervention. So today, computers can see, listen, translate, and interpret better than any human being on average. And the error rate of AI and deep learning has dropped from 20% in the last 5 to 6 years to 2%, 3% today. Computer vision, for example, or listening, audio, speech recognition. Why is this important for energy? The energy market is in its core an information business. So a lot of business activities will be automated to a certain degree or fully. This will have implications for price points, cost, adoption, innovation, disruption, impacting all, let's say, departments: marketing, sales, service, procurement, finance, supply chain management, optimization of flows. This is critical for solar and energy. And 20 years ago, it was online first. 10 years ago, mobile first and social first, social media. And now it's AI first. What do you mean? That's obvious, right? It's important. I know that. What I mean is the following. A few years ago, it was hardware first and then AI on top of it, including solar panels. Today, it's different. Today, it's AI first, and the hardware is secondary, the panels, or the solar nano coatings. They are secondary, derivative. Why is that the case? What do you mean? Because AI is so advanced today and so rapidly evolving that the creative possibilities of innovation, product innovation, are determined by AI. And then you make the atom choices, the hardware choices later on. This is the only way to compete in the next 5 years. AI first, not hardware first. Some examples of emerging technologies in solar. Knows about this one? Windows with, okay, most of you probably, using ultraviolet and infrared. It's only 10% more expensive than a classic window without any electricity generation. And this will drop to 3% in the next few years, I've been told last week. Energy storage. We have flow batteries. The key developments in storage are flow batteries, new compressed air techniques, autocapacitors, new batteries, graphene-based batteries. But flow batteries have higher capacity, more durable, right? And this is a key vendor. Maybe you heard about this. But in China, they have a company called CALT. Maybe you heard about it, show of hands. It's the biggest lithium-ion battery producer in the world. But they also offer flow batteries. And this will intensify the adoption of solar, right? We have generation, storage, and the smart grid. All developments are impacting these 3 domains quickly. Another example is that we have Tesla cars or other cars, because Tesla is only one player. In China, you have Xingdayang, who is 7 times bigger than Tesla in terms of EVs. But the EV becomes a mobile storage device. And we see different business models emerging with your home, with rooftop solar, combined with your car as storage. So you get total solutions for energy. Quite different from the past. Autocapacitors, graphene-based. Graphene, you probably heard about this, invented 14 years ago. It's a wonder material. Graphene is a nanotechnology variant. It's 200 times stronger than steel, 6 times lighter than steel. It's superconductive, very important. And it's more flexible. So again, more power, more efficiency, more sustainability, easily to recharge, more customer friendly. This is the future, graphene. Then we have a new technology called light. Light is a wave and a particle, right? And we have lasers and photonics, Check, we know that. But today we have nanophotonics and biophotonics, also happening in China, by the way. See nanophotonics. What can we do with light? Different things. For you as a human being, you are made of light. Your DNA is a package of photons of light. We discovered that recently. So it's DNA, chemistry, but more importantly, it's light. Below that. So we are made of light. We can measure your light. We emit light using our face and our hands. And we can communicate with light. We can measure your light and measure your health state today, holistically, in China. You can open doors with the light from your hand from a distance today. Now, why do you tell this story? I'm only interested in energy. Well, light is the most foundational technology in the next few years, together with quantum computing and blockchain and AI, of course. But light is even more important because light will impact all the other domains, including solar panels, solar nanocoatings, quantum computing. All domains will be impacted. So, to give you a sense of this, the solar panels are outdated today, also happening in China. They have solar nanocoatings, just a coating, a layer, no panel needed, and it's 10 times cheaper than a solar panel today. So you can put the coatings anywhere on top of it, on cars, on your clothing, whatever. This will have a huge impact in terms of sustainability. And I'm a little bit more hopeful as a result. And also in China, today they have quantum artificial intelligence plus nanotechnology, creating new materials. So they are testing 50 billion new materials in China today, as we speak, in simulations, virtually. And the good news is, they probably will have a solution for CO2 capture better than olivine, which is a mineral, but not scalable, to solve that issue. So we have new opportunities to help solve climate change at scale, cost effectively. Gives me a lot of hope. Solar nanocoatings and quantum AI-driven nanomaterials to absorb CO2. And finally, this is the most exciting new development. It's just around the corner, also happening in China again. I'll tell you the latest insights after this introduction. We can use the waste heat of the Earth and infrared radiation, capture it using special antennas to create energy. So what's the point? Well, solar energy and wind are complementary, right? Season and the day pattern, that's fine. But this is a solution which is independent of weather and probably also cheaper. Not today, but let's say mid to long term, the next 5 to 10 years. And why is this important, using quantum tunneling? Because this will allow us to move objects like a self-flying car. A self-flying car? Yeah. 30 startups in the world are developing self-flying cars, not self-driving cars. And these are being tested in May this year in China using this new way to create electricity. So quantum tunneling is the new energy technique of the future for self-flying cars and other objects. It sounds like science fiction, but it isn't. So this is very promising, just came out, but this is more advanced in China. And why is China so important in terms of new technologies? Because everybody is talking about Silicon Valley, right? Including myself, in the last 10 years. The reason is because China have a different way to compete. Actually, they collaborate way more intensively in ecosystems or in consortia than Silicon Valley companies or the area. Also, in China, there are way more technology graduates and students than in the US. 9 million versus, let's say, a few 100,000 a year. It's quite a difference. And also in China, there's a long-term technological vision and leadership by the government, but also by the companies. And they work together quite intensively. And as you probably know better than me, they move fast, right? In terms of solar energy, they invest $360 billion in the next 5 years, top down. And it's radically implemented quickly. With that, I would like to close, make it full circle. Think about the tsunami, the video. A lot of new developments. It's a new era. You have to think like this and look like this. Reality is a permanent museum. What I mean by that is that this is the way I live, right, for the last 5 years now. Everything I know is just an assumption. The only thing I know is stable is my own passion and purpose in life. The same applies to companies. So if you don't embrace this in behavior daily, you become vulnerable in the next 5 to 10 years. The tsunami is coming, the singularity is coming, the convergence of all these technologies. If you would like to hear some more or see some more from me, follow me on Twitter @VanGeest or send me an email, yuri@exoxo.co. Happy to share more. Hope you appreciate this. Thanks for your time and attention. Wish you a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Yuri. We have time for only one question, so I've been told. Unfortunately, we can't use Slido at the moment, but please, you'll get a chance to do that. So the question is, one of the key hallmarks of energy access, particularly in emerging markets and developing countries, is affordability. So the question I have for you is, with these new technologies that we're seeing, how are they going to be translatable into developing country contexts where they will actually be accessible and affordable for the population? I'll give you an example. I remember years ago when Tesla brought out the Powerwall storage solution. I had a huge debate with lots of intellectuals and industry people and engineers, and the unit price for the Powerwall was about $10,000 per unit. And so one of the things that governments and regulators were doing, how can you adopt those technologies in a shared pool or utilization system, which would make it affordable, so you have different users sharing it. And with all these fantastic exponential technologies you show, I see a bit of a disconnect with many of the regions, like the region I hail from. So, I mean, what is your comment and what is the inflection point for technology when it comes to affordability for those who really need energy?
Yeah, great question. So very quickly, I will look around because of the audience. Technology is lowering in cost by half on average every 18 months. Sometimes slower, like in solar, but it's happening. That means it becomes more democratized, decentralized, more affordable, right? This applies to most technology that I talked about. So I'm very optimistic long term that we are moving into a world in which the blockchain is the operating system, allowing for radical decentralization, including solar energy. And so probably also long-term off the grid, long-term, right? But not in the next 10 to 20 years. So that's one point. The key question is, what are the key platforms emerging locally and globally? And how much power do they have? And how open are they? How affordable they make their services? That's the key question. But I do believe that at the edges, it will decentralize. You get a lot of new startups and services and applications which will be in favor of developing countries. The concern I have is that is the knowledge base, right? The innovation, the competencies that are evolving, if they are on par globally, to help drive the implementation, adoption, and employment, and that's a concern I have. But this applies to all vertical markets, not just in solar. Right? I think about the GAFA discussion, and in China you have Tencent and Alibaba and Baidu. The centralization of platforms, but the edges have become decentralized, democratized. And I think the same will happen in solar, which is great for developing countries. But they have to invest a lot of money and time and education to make this work. In some, I'm more optimistic than pessimistic, because technology itself moves to zero, right? So it will become more affordable.
Right. I mean, thanks for that view, and I think it's one that is worth exploring a bit further. On that note, I'm going to have to thank Yuri for his presentation, and I'm sure he'll hang around for discussions later. So, on the issue of technology, so in New York, there's a firm alongside a technology firm that are developing a microgrid system where users can buy and sell solar power through a blockchain platform that's called Transactive Grid. It's a very innovative concept, and it's some of the innovative technologies that I think members of the next panel are going to be helping us explore. So first up, I'd like to introduce them. First up, we have Takahiro Kawahara, who is the Senior Associate for Frontier Power at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and he's going to be giving a presentation on his area of expertise. Welcome, Takahiro. Thank you.
Excuse me. Okay, sorry. Good morning. So I'm starting with a short introduction of what we are doing and then talk about applications of blockchain to solar business in emerging markets. Briefly, so we, as a Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we analyze different energy sectors and technologies. So today's topic is relevant to two things. One is the emerging technologies. The team of the emerging technologies covers information technologies, blockchain, machine learning, which could impact the energy industries. And then another one is frontier power, which covers off-grid and weak-grid areas in emerging countries, which I'm in charge of. And in the frontier power team, we cover off-grid solar, microgrids, solar hybrids for infrastructure, including telecommunication base stations, and we do analysis from different angles, such as business models, markets, and policies. Yuri already covered the concept of blockchain, so I will quickly go through. But I think the important point here is what are benefits of using blockchain. I think most important thing is the feature of blockchain is there can be transactions without a central authority. So, for example, bank. So the one point is trustless, and other benefits can be security and resilience and data privacy. Also, the blockchain has a framework that incentivizes many participants to come in. Why blockchain has had traction in the energy industry these days? So those two charts compare global cumulative installed capacity between 2016 and 2040. What important point here is compared to 2016, small-scale PV, which is below 1 megawatt rooftop PV in most of the cases, will increase from 108 gigawatt to 1.4 terawatt by 2040, as we expect. And another point here is by 2040, flexible capacity, which includes energy storage and demand response, will account for about 7% of the total capacity by 2040. What this means is that the energy system will be more distributed. Smart meters will be installed in common. So energy system will be increasingly connected, distributed. That means grid operators need some help by digital technologies to manage supply and demand and then manage the distributed energy systems. This is the reason why many startups are coming up in the blockchain in the energy industry these days. So the left side chart shows the investment deals by a type of financing for blockchain startups in the energy industries. And we have tracked the total investment in this sector, which accounts for about $143 million since 2017. And then 85% of this total investment came from initial coin offering. What are the main applications of blockchain to the energy industries? it's commonly known, three applications commonly known are peer-to-peer energy trading, distributed energy resource management systems, public EV charging. And then majority of people are well aware about the peer-to-peer trading, energy trading, and then some utilities and startups are already testing. But we think that the bigger impacts come in the other two applications by benefiting from the non-existence of the central authority by using a blockchain, which means that operators can feel more comfortable by using blockchain for distributed energy management systems or EV charging because of the reduced cybersecurity cost and improved data privacy. But how about application to blockchain to the energy industries in emerging countries? Compared to what's happening in Europe or US or Asia, there are not so many examples, but there are some startups are coming up. I think in this next session, the Sun Exchange will probably explain more detail, but so I will touch a little bit. The Sun Exchange has created a financial platform that individuals or small investment funds can finance solar projects in sub-Saharan Africa without going through banks by using blockchain payment systems. Another example is Thai utility Banchak's BCBG partners with the Power Ledger to test peer-to-peer trading for microgrids in Thailand microgrids. Now the time is running out, so I'm going to stop, but we can discuss more in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Takahiro. I think now we're going to invite Frank Constant, from the CEO of Constant Energy, to come up and give us his presentation. Thank you, Frank.
Good morning, everyone. I've been based for 22 years in Asia, so I'll talk mainly about the Asian market here. And I'm a veteran power person, doing conventional power for 10 years, and the last 10 years done a lot of solar. That's one of the plants we did in the last 5 years in Thailand. And I'll talk about not only about solar, but especially about solar and storage storage becoming, I think we're at the beginning of a very interesting wave that is going to be probably as interesting as the solar wave that we've experienced in the last 10 years. Just a few words on our fund. We just set up a new fund which is focused not only on solar, but also on corporate PPAs. As you can see from the monks and the elephant, it's mainly focused on the Asian markets, emerging Asian markets. And we also will invest into storage IPP installations, located with storage or without storage, with our team of IPP experts on the development, financing, and asset management. That's the last fund we set up 10 years ago, a fund called Sonedix, which was started in Europe, and we developed the business into 8 countries, and just sold that business to JP Morgan Asset Management a year ago. And asset base about $1 billion in 7 years. So talking about the storage, I think you know that curve. My personal experience of storage is, for Puerto Rico, we bought batteries with solar plants 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I think I paid $1.3 million per megawatt hour for these batteries. It was for a 70 megawatt hour of solar PV plant. Today, if I buy the same batteries, I can probably buy it for $500,000. So the cost has dropped about 3 times in 3 years. And that's driven basically mainly by the gigafactories. There's a huge international competition also. And it reminds me a lot of the solar market 15 years ago. The big difference is I think we've got more competition in the manufacturing than we had in the solar. So I think the drops in costs will be at least as significant on the storage. Mainly focusing on lithium. That's our preferred way of storing electricity in our power plants. I talk about the drop of price of cost of batteries, and the other piece to the equation and why we're going to see explosive growth in storage is the need the increasing need by the utility sector of batteries. And these needs are driven by 4 global trends in utilities. One is ever-growing penetration of renewable. I think it's very clear now from 3-4 countries. 15 years ago, I think every country has now a renewable program. And most countries have already at least 20 to 30% of penetration, at least the largest economies of renewable. And that's creating, of course, a lot of issues for the grids. Second, we've got this climate change issue, which creates a lot of uncertainty on our grid infrastructure, a lot of pressure on our grid infrastructure. Look at what happened in Puerto Rico a few months ago. Look at what happened in northeast of the US. And you know, every 3 years, we've got this 100-year floods happening somewhere in the world. So, and this is putting a lot of pressure on the grids. Transmission falling down, more and more frequent lightning strikes on substations. So a major issue facing the infrastructure of the grid. Third, global trend is security concerns, terrorist attack on grid infrastructure. That's something, especially in the Western societies, regulators are looking more and more into. And the fourth global trend on the utility is the decentralization push. Distributed generation, creating need for more storage. But we're going to see explosive growth, and I think this is set up for a big wave of new business model and global development in the storage sector. So how do we plan on our small scale to surf that wave? Well, you got an example here. You know, we're using our utility solar PV and combining it with storage. Solar PV, as you see from the top, the issue for the grid operator is that it's intermittent, so it doesn't really control when it produces power. And secondly, there's very limited ancillary services. So while with a gas plant or a coal plant, you can have a lot of ancillary, you can get KEVAs, there's a lot of ability to service the grid apart from selling kilowatt hour. With a solar plant, very limited ability to provide these ancillary services. Think of the ancillary services as the oil that makes the engine of the grid working. You know, you can do without it, but not for long. And solar is very poor in ancillary services. But with battery, the battery is really the champion of ancillary services. I don't think any other generator can provide as many ancillary services as fast as what lithium-ion battery especially can do. So definitely one very interesting business model here, combining our solar power plant existing with some battery. Korean market is very active at the moment. We're doing that in Korea, combining solar and batteries. In Laos, we're in talk with a 600 megawatt hydro plant to put in floating storage and batteries in order to supply the auxiliary load of these hydro plants while they are not producing, as opposed to this. And instead of buying expensive power from the grid, we could provide much cheaper with a battery and with our solar panel. Another example of another business model that we can think of it is not only as a utility scale, large scale, but also at the CNI scale. That's, this picture is a plant we installed on a Schneider rooftop. So we own the plant, we own the panels, and we sell power directly to the industrial. This is under what we call corporate PPAs, which is a very growing market in worldwide now, and we think has a lot of potential to grow very quickly in Asia. Not only we provide green power, but we also provide savings to these industrial off-takers. So phase one is we're putting solar panel on roofs, supplying directly the industrial user at a discount, and greenifying their power supply. And phase two, in 2 years or 3 years, we'll install an ESS, a battery, and allowing us to provide benefits to the industrial by reducing their demand charge that they're being charged by the utility. Lastly, so just to summarize our 3 business model, and we're very excited about what's ahead in terms of our development on solar, on batteries. We were able to ride or to surf the wave of solar in the last 10 years. I think we are looking forward to surf the wave of storage in those markets that we are developing over the next 3-4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So our final presentation before the Q&A is going to be by Michael Guerra, the CEO of Energy Access Ventures. Please welcome Michael. Thank you.
How's this work? There we go. Well, good morning, all of you. Energy Access Ventures is a $90 million VC fund. We invest along the off-grid value chain. So what is the off-grid value chain, and what are the business models that have entered this space and caused a lot of change? You're familiar with this, but it's good to put them all in one place. So you all know the solar home systems, little solar panels sitting on someone's roof, don't have to be, even very rich people. They can buy them outright, or typically they will make small micro payments in Kenya, which is where we're based. We have mobile money, and you can pay a little bit of money every month for a year or 2 years, and then it's yours. We don't just invest in the companies that distribute and manufacture these devices. We invest in people who finance them. We invest in people who develop the software. And an ecosystem is evolving over there. Next down the list, you have mini-grid systems. Same concept, but as the name implies, you're creating a community-wide micro-utility. Again, there is a value chain, all of which has investment opportunities. And you see a lot happening. It's very, very early days. We are, all of us, pioneers in solar home systems and in mini-grids. The place where we are really excited, where we really see the potential for great disruption, and again, from the off-grid perspective, is CNI. Now, we've talked a lot about CNI at this event, and rightly so. But when you step away from CNI in an area where the grid actually works pretty well, and there are cost advantages to be obtained by using CNI, as we've heard over the last few days, and you move to an area where either the grid is not much good, unreliable, or not existent at all, then everything changes. Then, the rules are turned upside down. The fact that you can now go to a mini-industrial estate, a bank, and say, well, we can actually put, a bunch of solar panels on your roof or in your garden, and it's going to cost you the same as the grid, if the grid were working or were there. Or it might even cost you less. I mean, this changes everything. And there's, a little story which I'd like to tell you about a company in Lagos, which we know well, and they put solar panels on banks. Why do they put solar panels on banks in downtown Lagos? Because, the grid is there, but you can safely hang on to the wires, and your chances of being electrocuted are quite low. And so, also the billing system has broken down, so the banks have gone offline. They've cut themselves off the grid, and they have their own diesel generator, which costs them a fortune, but at least it's reliable. So this company goes in and says, listen, I'm going to put a solar panel on your roof, and inverters, storage, a small diesel generator for when it's dark, and it works. So we were thinking of investing in these people. We're an impact fund, by the way, so storm of questions from investors saying, this is a bank in downtown, how is it impactful? And the answer came 2 days later when their main bank customer said, this thing works so well in downtown Lagos, we're going to open 3 new banks in completely off-grid areas, which of course has, great social impact because it gives people jobs. And in my final seconds, where do we go next with CNI? And as Yuri said, it starts to become all about the smarts and the software. Where you have, for example, a bank, a business, solar panel, limited amount of space for the solar panel, a small diesel generator, you have a lot of decisions to make. When do I turn on the generator? How many times do I cycle the battery? Depends what kind of battery I have. When do I turn the AC off, to say AC on Sunday afternoon to cool the building in time for Monday because my electricity is cheap? You start to find there are actually dozens of different parameters which you need to optimize to make the best use of your assets. And that becomes a problem of AI, deep learning, and eventually quantum computing. The number of these assets around the entire space in Africa is going to be so huge that this becomes a big data. And software and smarts is where the future is. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. We're going to do a quick Q&A now. So please encourage you to use your Slido panels for the questions. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick poll, also using Slido. And the question on the poll is, what trends do you think are going to be the most disruptive to the solar industry over the next decade or so? I think that's the question. Yeah, so the question is, what do you think will be the most disruptive global trend that could impact solar PV in years to come? And we have a word cloud poll. Storage. I think it's categorical, right? Batteries, storage. What else do we have? Smart invoicing. Off-grid. Smart grid batteries. All pretty much related. I think generally shows that the audience generally agrees with much of the presentations that we've had. So my first question is really going to be to Takahiro. You mentioned the amount of investment that was going into blockchain energy startups, $143 million over the last year, dollars. It doesn't strike me like a huge amount when we think of the overall investments that just going into clean energy startups overall. So my question is really around scalability. The technology is smart, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's innovative. Is it that investors don't quite understand the market prospects of these blockchain energy startups? Or is it the business models, because 143 million compared to overall investment in that particular startup space for clean energy is quite small.
That's a good question. So actually, in terms of scalability, we still think that it's there's probably too much expectation in the industry about blockchain. And then as I showed a chart, the majority of the funding came from initial coin offering, which means that, let's assume that you are a startup or blockchain company, and if you issue crypto tokens, and if there's a high demand in the investor side to buy crypto tokens, it's not so difficult to raise money compared to traditional way of financing, such as equity financing. So our view is that not all of the financing has proven the business models yet. So the scalability in terms of that financing is still questionable. But I think the interesting point is, regardless emerging countries or developed countries, utilities, the large utilities are quite interested in investing in those sectors. The example is Tokyo Electric, the biggest Japanese utilities, investing blockchain startups in Europe. I think they invest in Grid Plus, one example, because utilities believe that utilities also know that the energy system will be decentralized. Rooftop solar is coming up. The retail customers, they are losing retail customers. But eventually, utilities want to understand how the blockchain can be useful for their business, such as managing energy resource systems, and also for the peer-to-peer trading. So eventually, those businesses could be scaled up when the utilities adopt these technologies. But at the moment, it's majority of the businesses are still piloting stage. So it's too early to say it's scaling up quickly.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it for now. A question here, I think maybe I'll let Frank, if you'd be happy to take this particular question from the audience. And it is, if you integrate blockchain and storage into mini-grid, do you see this will be a more reliable and affordable alternative to the grid in emerging markets? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the first thing, I don't really understand what blockchain is, so I'll talk about what I understand. And I don't invest in what I don't
Maybe
understand.
that's why we only have $143 million.
And our business model is mainly with large customers, so utilities or large industry. So we don't mind sending 3-5 invoice per
But
month.
maybe you
typically.
could comment on the storage.
No, I will, yeah, and I will touch more on the storage. I think
Yeah.
we do see opportunities in, given that PV now is competitive in a lot of markets with industrial rates, except where industrial rates are subsidized by the government. But places like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, you could actually set up power plants next to industrial estate and put some storage and be competitive to the grid for most of the day. And then you have the grid in the evening. Okay? Then, so it's already there economically. Indonesia can do it. Difficult regulatory-wise. We talk about regulation. Regulation don't allow that to do that, but Thailand, you can actually do it, and Malaysia, you can actually do it already. So I think that has significant potential. In places where you do off-grid, whether it's to mines or whether it's to industrial estate in Africa, for example, we were talking just earlier about that. Definitely, it's much better than having an unreliable grid or than having diesel, and you can definitely be competitive. And I think there's a lot of potential investment potential on
Can I be naughty and
sure.
talk about that as well? The way 300 million people in China got electricity, people who lived in rural areas, was to move to the cities. The case for extending the grid to rural communities without industrial off-takers is not a good one. So to answer the question, to whoever asked it, I think mini-grids, distributed mini-grids and solar home systems are probably the way to go for communities.
In all markets, sorry? The markets that you're familiar with?
Certainly in African markets, possibly in all markets. The idea of running transmission lines over hundreds of kilometers to small communities in markets where the income is not high. That's the qualifier.
Yeah.
If we have a program in Kenya where there are new grid lines going to homes, and these homes have 3 lights and a mobile phone charger, it doesn't pay for the transmission losses on the line.
Yeah. And I have to take you up on that because you talk about in markets where the income is not high. In your presentation, one of the things that the segments of the market that you're really bullish on is the C&I market, the commercial and industrial. So given that you've worked a lot in Africa, for instance, what are some of the dynamics you're seeing? Is there significant uptake of these technologies in that particular space? I also saw you mention net metering. There were other aspects of that new segment. I wondered whether you could comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, in Africa, it's C&I on steroids because you have so many other dynamics at work. You have so many other needs. The simple fact is that you have a very, poor grid in many areas, and in other areas you don't have a grid at all. Consequently, if you're using C&I. And somebody said that, when we had the words going out before that, solar will be affected by manufacturing positively. I could also put it the other way around. If there is a single factory every 6 months that can open up somewhere in Africa and manufacture something which is enabled by the fact that it can now have its own reliable power on its roof, that's the biggest impact.
Okay.
And employ people productively with rising productivity, that's the nirvana. I don't know if it's going to happen, but let's try.
I have to ask Takahiro and Frank to comment on this, because with the deployment of these systems, the mini-grids, the off-grids, one of the things I've always wondered is about the value chain of either production or manufacturing or assembling. And wouldn't it be easier, even from an investor point of view, is if the value chain is also located within the region or the locality of use, right? I don't know whether that's something, maybe less on the blockchain side because you're taking away from the physical domain more into the digital domain. But Frank, is this something that you think would be viable in some markets?
Yeah, we've seen some examples. I mean, we developed and financed a 86 megawatt solar plant in South Africa, in Northern Cape, 3 years ago. And South African government has a local content obligation. So more than about 60% of the solar plant was actually coming from added value from South Africa. There's certainly benefit on that. I mean, South Africa has 30% unemployment rate, so their priority is clearly to reduce unemployment. But you do need, you do need to have the regulator step in and force this on if you want it to happen. Otherwise, everybody's going to manufacture in China. That's today inverters, panels, batteries. Everybody prefers to manufacture in China. That's just a current situation. So if you let completely the market forces act, you will not naturally have people citing part of the value chain of this manufacturing in Africa or in other country or more difficult country in South Asia, for example. So you do need the regulator to instill that. It's been done very successfully in South Africa, for example.
There's a question here, at what price level do energy storage systems become a part of the on-off-grid solar PV projects? I would qualify that by saying probably at what price level does ESS become a viable part of the on or off-grid solar PV system? I don't know who wants to take that. I'm trying to sort of read in between the lines of the person who posed the question.
Look, I think it's very much depend on the application. First, you have off-grid and on-grid. Okay, so off-grid, fairly quickly. Mines, for example, we're looking at application with solar plus mines where we can offset diesels. Easy. 20%, 30% reduction in power price with introduction of solar plus batteries. Then you got the on-grid, and the on-grid depends on the country, because every country has their own system of billing industrial customers, both on demand charge, how much capacity they take, and energy charge. So today in Korea, very interesting to do it. It's very interesting to install storage, combine with solar and sell power to industries, because of the specific tariffs that industries in Korea are subjected to. So I would say there's not one magic price at which storage is competitive or not.
Okay. Takahiro, it seems like we have quite a few skeptics in the audience around the blockchain and the energy axis. And this person says they've listened to many presentations about blockchain, but never found a successful business model. What is the problem to get this technology turned into a business?
I pretty much agree with that comment, actually, because most of the startups are actually piloting. And it's hard to say, okay, business. I don't see that any business has actually scaled up, as recalling previous comment, because many are testing. The problems are, I think, they're quite diverse, like technological improvement are necessary. Cybersecurity issue is there. Also, depending on the country, the legal and policy scheme need to be adapted to new regulations. So I think the challenges are in line with many aspects, both technological and social.
Yeah. Now, okay, here's a thought. So one of the things, and I think this may actually help tackle the question, if I'm an off-grid energy consumer in a country like Nigeria, which is where I come from, I'm using a diesel-fueled generator. I buy this unit of a generator. If there's a problem with my generator, I know who exactly is going to be responsible for my after-sales service. I know where to find a technician to come and service that generator, because the entire ecosystem around that particular piece of equipment is very well embedded. Now, if I'm a smart grid or mini grid user or pay-as-you-go solar consumer, can I get a commoditized standard product? Is that something? I mean, I think that is part of what technology should be helping to solve. I don't know whether you can comment on that whole idea of commoditization, particularly in terms of user accessibility.
Increasingly so. I mean, the average solar home system is not using rocket science technology. The four of us, if we were bored on a Saturday afternoon, could probably design one ourselves. The devil is in the detail in two things. One is, the software control systems, the smarts, a collection of information from various customers, and then the other one, you hit the nail totally on the head, the after-sales service. What we're currently seeing with most of the bigger solar home system companies is that they're very vertically integrated. They do everything. They're designing systems in Shenzhen, and then they're actually servicing customers on the ground in somewhere in Nigeria. What I expect will happen is what's happened in many other industries. In time, is that it'll become less vertically integrated, and you'll have companies which are really focused, for example, on providing excellent customer service, so that just like you with your genset, you know who to call if something goes wrong.
Okay, so we've run out of time, but I wanted us to sort of look into our crystal ball from two angles. First of all, in terms of the regional hotspots you see over the next decade, in terms of where the origins of the technology, in terms of the innovation, and then the location of the deployment of that technology. So which markets do you all see as being sort of the future hubs, both in terms of the innovation and the deployment and use of this technology? I would start with you, Frank, and then Takahiro, and come back to Michael.
Okay, I just talk about storage. 10 years ago, I was in China, and I was asking them, okay, how many PV manufacturing facilities you have in China? The answer was 400. Already 10 years ago, they had 400 solar manufacturing plants in China. Last year, I was at BYD in Shenzhen, one of the largest battery manufacturers in the world. I asked them the same question on storage. How many battery manufacturing you have in China? Answer was 400. So we've seen that movie before. I think we know how it ends. I think the production will be mainly based in China.
Okay, and the deployment in China as well?
Deployment, I mean, China is still the biggest user of wind farms worldwide for the last 10 years. I think in battery we're going to see the same thing.
Okay.
But they're certainly going to, there'll be 20-25% of the demand, and they will probably end up being 70-80% of the battery manufacturing.
All right, thank you. Takahiro?
So globally, right?
Yeah, globally.
Yeah. So in terms of origin of technology, I think Europe, because out of the 135 blockchain startups in the energy industry we tracked, 2/3 are coming from Europe. And a lot of activities and testing are going on. In terms of what the market is, I think they also probably Europe, North America, and Europe to Asia, where, for example, the EV deployment is happening, because blockchain can be applied to EV charging sharing.
Okay. And the funding, where will that come from?
The funding?
Yes.
For the technology development, for example, utilities are interested in these technologies. Yeah, that's, I think, about in terms of financial institutes, I'm not sure whether they have strong interest at the moment yet. But utilities are the main thing, I think, for the moment.
Thank you. Michael?
Solar home systems, I think the best markets are East Africa. The population density is about right for that. Mini-grids, places like the DRC and Nigeria. CNI, pretty much all over the continent. In terms of innovation, I think cutting-edge innovation I expect to be mainly Europe, the US, and slowly moving to China. Innovation in terms of taking that core technology and applying it to Africa, that could well happen in Africa.
All right, thanks guys. Please help me thank the panel. I know we had to rush, but hopefully you can engage them in the network. Thank you.